welcome to Central. We're so glad that you're here with us today. Why don't you stand if you haven't already and join us as we sing together this morning. He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. sing praises to your name. Praises to your name. The name that's so much higher than all names. We give honor to your name. Jesus. sing to you. Jesus, we worship you with our voices, but with our hearts, because you are so good. You've been so good to us. We can't help but worship you, God. So God, would you know today that we love you? We're so inspired and encouraged by your love for us. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Hey, I just want to encourage you today that maybe not all of your I's will be dotted or your T's will be crossed when you encounter God. But he's shown up for me over and over and over again, that I keep coming back to him. That's why I keep coming back to him. That's why I keep singing fiercely and passionately from week to week, because he's proven himself to me, not because he had to, but because he wants to. So over and over again, no matter what I'm going through, I can count on this God that we're singing about. I can come to him, and after a while I start wanting to come to him. So maybe you're in this place and you're like, what am I feeling right now? What is this presence you're talking about? What am I sensing? It's God, and it's his love for you. And for those of us who sing at the top of our lungs, you're a holy God, you're a good God, be lifted up. We keep coming back to him because he's shown himself to us in that way. So I just want to encourage you, if you have questions, you can come to him. It's okay. I still have questions. I have a lot of questions. Not everything is the way I expect it to be from day to day. But with all my questions and my heart open to him, there's peace. That's my encouragement to you. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to know such a good God as well. Thanks for singing, everyone. Thanks for, every week. It's so great. This is our favorite time of the week. I'm going to invite you now to grab a seat as we continue.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Central on this chilly spring morning, and it's so good to see all your faces. Yeah, welcome to Central. Special welcome to you if this is your very first time joining us. Thank you so much for taking that step and coming to a new place. Really appreciate you being with us today. And a welcome to you joining us online, whether you're here in around Niagara or somewhere else in the world. Thanks so much for joining us, and a special welcome to you as well if this is your first time tuning in to Central Online. Here at Central, we're really driven by these two main convictions. The first one is to introduce people to faith. We believe that a life with faith in God at the center of it is life as it's supposed to be lived. And so you want to introduce people to faith and, all that faith entails and what faith is all about. And then secondly, we want to, help all of us go deeper in that faith so we can learn more about God and really live the lives that we intended to live. And so that really drives us. And just want to let you know, especially if this is your first time here, that that's what we're all about. And this is a place where you can do that safely, and it's a place that you can belong as well. Now, if you are new, maybe you have some questions and you want to maybe find out more about us or whatever's on your mind, we'd love to actually connect with you and even put a small gift in your hand. And there's a few ways that we can do that. The first one is, if you're here on location, there's a tall card in the seat back in front of you. It's called the Connect card, and you can grab that sometime during our time together and just fill it in with as much or as little information as you want to put in there. And then when we're done, just head out to the lobby, the big blue wall. Someone would love to exchange that card for a gift and just personally say, welcome to Central. Now, if you prefer using your phone, we have that option as well. So just text the word connect, text that word connect to the number on the screen, and you'll receive some prompts to connect with us if that's an option that you prefer. And those of you joining us online, feel free to click the New Here button if this is your first time joining us. Our online pastor would love to interact with you, and the rest of you who are maybe not new as well, you can interact online as well. Awesome. Well, we're going to continue on with our time as we give, so I'm going to invite the host forward to do that. Now, if this is your first time, just want to let you know, please feel zero obligation to give. This is something that we do as a church family, and so just let that plate pass you by. Just pay no mind to it. Something we do as a church family to make a difference in our community and actually across the world. And a bunch of options on the screen for you who do give, whatever works best for you. So, as we're doing this, just a couple of things I want to let you know about. Just two things to keep top of mind today. And the first one is about Alpha. So Alpha is this incredible course where you can really just get to meet people and make friendships, but also ask sort of the tough questions in life. Questions about, who we are, why we're here, who is God, and everything in between that. And Alpha is actually, it's been done by millions of people across the globe. Like, honestly, there are probably tens of millions of people who have done this. And back in January 2005, when I first came to Central, that's how I got connected and learned more about God, starting my faith journey. And I still have friends from Alpha back in January 2005. Still live in this area, we're still close. And so maybe you're sitting here and you have questions about God, you just want to learn more about God and connect with people. Alpha is the place to do that. And it's actually beginning this week. It's an 8-week series starting today. It's actually happening, the first one is happening right now. Upstairs as we speak. But you're not too late. You can actually sign up to get involved next week or even the week after. Just head to the big blue wall in the lobby and someone will give you some more information about how to join up with Alpha. It's a tremendous course. And if you have any questions about God or just want to get connected, that's a fantastic way to do that. And the second one is we have a group of young people from Central who are heading to New York City this week for a mission trip. And so we just wanted to celebrate them and send them out. So I'm just going to ask you to give them a warm round of applause as they come out on stage. The team from Central heading to NYC. Yeah. Great stuff. So this awesome team, they're going to be heading into New York. They're not going to off-Broadway shows. They're actually going to actually do some solid work and work on the ground with a team in New York. And as a church, we just want to thank them and bless them as they go out. So we're just going to pray for them. So why don't you join me as we pray for them before they head out. God, just thank you so much for this opportunity you give us to serve. You serve us in so many ways, and you allow us to be your hands and feet here on the earth, to not only make a difference in the community in which we live in, but actually communities all around the world. And as this team heads to New York, I just pray, Father, for your help and God, your guidance, so that they would be able to meet the right people, even the people who they right now on Sunday morning, they're going about their business. They have no idea that this week they're going to meet a bunch of Canadians. And God, I pray that you would sort of prepare their hearts as they're going to be served, or even just just random interactions on the streets of New York, whatever happens, Father. I just pray that you would make their hearts ready. You would make the hearts of this team ready to serve in really practical ways, to bring hope to people who need hope in the moments of interaction, and to really make a difference on the ground in New York. Thank you so much that you allow us to do this, that we can be part of making a difference, not only here in Niagara, but somewhere else in the world. Amen. So it's great that this team's heading to New York, and maybe you're sitting here and you're thinking, yeah, I'd love to do something like that. I'd love to go on a mission trip. Well, we have many of these trips happening throughout the year. And so if you are sitting here and thinking you'd love to get more information, or maybe you're actually gung-ho to already just jump in and do one, you can head to our website, centralcc.ca/mission, and you can find out more information about what's going on, the upcoming mission trips, and what you can get involved in. Or maybe you're sitting here and you think, actually, I'm fine in Canada. I'd love to just serve right here. I don't like planes, whatever works for you. We have opportunities here in Niagara as well. And we have a class that's tailor-made for you. It's called Next Steps. It's a way you can find out more about who we are as a church, and what we have going on in and around Niagara, ways that you can serve, ways that you can make a difference in someone else's life. And so next week at 12 o'clock, we're going to be having Next Steps, open to anyone who just wants to find out more about being involved. It's tailor-made for you, so you can come out next week. If you want more information about that, again, head out to the big blue wall and someone can help you out. If you have really any questions about anything, the friendly faces of the big blue wall can help you out this morning. Tremendous. Well, thanks so much for your attention. I'm going to ask you to turn to the screen as we kick off a brand new series called The Problem of God.
Hasn't our study of science disproved the existence of God finally? We know when the universe began. 15 billion years ago. Big Bang. All time, all energy, all space, all matter in an instant. And everything came into existence. Hence, we don't need God. So what are the top 10 skeptical challenges that people wage against Christianity? This book is an exploration of the answers I found that actually reframe all of those issues to show that Christianity is not only the most truthful, but the most hopeful in the marketplace of ideas.
Great. Well, good morning. How's everybody feeling today? Good. How many of you are ready for the sun? It'll come. It's coming. One of these weeks. It's going to be a sunny weekend. Great to have you here. Even if it's just getting sunny, it's good. And we're so glad that if you're here on the heels of Easter, thanks so much for coming back. Maybe you heard some of the conversation we're going to be having today, and you're a self-proclaimed skeptic, and you're like, okay, show me what this is all about, because I'm not convinced. We're so glad that you're here. And if you've been in the faith a long time, also glad that you're here. So if you find yourself somewhere in the middle of all of that, we're going to be kind of diving in over the next 4 weeks, really into some of the toughest questions skeptics have asked over the history, really. And so we've been really inspired by a book called The Problem of God, which you can see here. And this is a book, actually, that you can pick up at the cafe if you like. It's $20. And we're going to be kind of digging into 4 of these questions of the 10 that it sort of unpacks. And so if you've ever had a problem with God, or you are having a problem with God, with something that you're going through, or you know someone with a problem of God, this is a great resource for you as you begin to explore some of these things. There's some chapters in here we're not going to get to, but there's a great chapter if you're interested in sex. The problem of sex is in this book as well. So again, if you grew up with a narrative like I did that was like church was anti-sex, they thought it was vile, disgusting, terrible, and awful, and so you should get married and then have it. This deals with that, okay? So yeah, it sounds twisted. You're right, and this helps kind of navigate some of those kinds of things. So we're going to be talking about next week about hypocrites. So if you ever had a problem with people who say they follow God and are hypocrites, we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to take a break for Mother's Day and celebrate our amazing moms. And then we're going to talk about the problem of the Bible and then the problem of Jesus. And so if you've ever had a problem with things that you've read in the Bible, you've kind of been skeptical of Jesus and the whole rising from the dead stuff, whatever that is, we're going to be kind of really diving into truth. And sort of here's my hope for you over the next few weeks is that you will explore truth and that this truth will set you free. Because I think if there's anything we could be on the same playing field on, it's this idea that there is truth to be explored, and if you find it, it'll set you free to be who you were made to be. So we can all kind of come at it from this same angle that we're going to commit to exploring truth. So are you with me? You into that? Okay, let's do that together. So today we're going to talk about science, and I'm going to do my best to make science fun. For some of you, this is going to be really hard, okay? So if it's not fun, I apologize. That's my bad. But we're going to do our best to make science fun. We're going to talk about science and faith, and do these things go together? Because there's a lot of myths when it comes to science and Christianity, science and faith, science and religion. And so we're gonna kind of plow through some of these myths, exploring truth. And I need to give a couple prefaces for today's message. Number one is my background is not scientific. I have a degree in theology. So in the beginning half of this, I'm going to do my best to curate some of the brightest minds, and I'm going to present to you what they're saying about science and faith. And we're going to kind of plow through some of those in the beginning, and then we're going to sort of turn it in the end to actually talk about what does this mean for us. Now, a couple things. Number one is if you have a question during this series, we want you to text in your question, all right? And you can text it in to this number, 905-937-5610, and text the word Table Talk. We've just started a brand new segment. For those of you that don't know, we have a podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can check it out there. But every week our messages go on there. But once a month we also do a thing called Table Talk. And so I believe this week we have, from this last series, a brand new episode coming out. But at the end of the month, we're going to answer all your questions as it relates to your problems that you have with God, okay? If you have problems with other things other than God, don't write those questions in. You're like, I have a hernia. Sorry, can't help you with that one. You got to go to the hospital for that one. But if you have a problem with God, text Table Talk, 905-937-5610. And also today, I'm gonna fire hose you with a lot of information. So if you would like the notes to follow along with or to read through this week, you can also text that same number. Just text the word notes to 905-937-5610. We'll get you those notes. It'll kick you back a link, and you can sort of follow along today if you like as well. All right, are you ready? Science and faith. Okay, so we're gonna explore 4 myths today, and we're gonna try to do our best to debunk some of them. And as we do that, I believe that we're going to see some things. Really, my hope is that you see some things that you've never seen before. So if you're a skeptic, my hope is that you would doubt your doubts just enough to see something you've never seen before, okay? If you're an agnostic, you believe God is not someone you can even know, my hope is that you would doubt your doubts enough to see that maybe there's something that you're not seeing. If you're an atheist, my hope is that you would actually see that maybe there is a God that you can believe in. At least begin pursuing to see if there is something worth exploring with the truth of God. And if you're in the faith a long time, here's my hope for you too, is that you would actually have a hope for the reason that you believe. You would have a reason for the hope that you believe. That's what actually the Bible teaches us, that you would actually have a reason for all that you believe, that you've experienced, that there would be depth and truth, and it would be rich in your life. So that's kind of where we're going today. All right, so with that being said, we're going to go to myth number 1, and this is, myth number 1 is that faith is anti-intellectual. How many have heard this before? Right, that there's 2 kinds of people. There's people who live in the swamp with guns and a steady diet of Duck Dynasty, and then there's people who go to university and don't have faith as a crutch, and you have these sort of, sorry, if you like the swamp and guns and Duck Dynasty, that's awesome. We love you. But there's these 2 kind of extremes. We have people who have faith as a crutch, and we have people that are smart and are about pursuing the facts, and these 2 things cannot coexist, right? There's a bit of a narrative that faith is sort of anti-intellectual. And what's interesting about this is that sociologists over the last 50 years have really believed that in our age of enlightenment, that by the end of the 20th century, that we would have been people that would really lack faith. After all of our study of philosophy, of cosmology, of astronomy, of philosophy and biology, all of these different studies, that we would actually have so much truth that at the end of all of it, we wouldn't have faith. In fact, if you grew up and you watched Star Trek in the 60s, some of you probably wouldn't know what the 60s were like, but if you watch reruns and you're a big do we have any Star Trekkies? Have any Trekkies in the house? Yeah, they're not very proud. Not very proud. It's okay. You can be proud, loud and proud. What's interesting is Star Trek in the 60s really portrayed this sterile future that was very void of religion. That was actually on purpose because sociologists believe as we discovered information, we wouldn't actually have faith, or if we did, it would be very little. And what's interesting is sociologists are seeing that there is a robust faith that's actually thriving around the world, that's growing, that even as people self-actualize and they get more information, and as they grow in information and truth, they're actually realizing that they're innately spiritual, that the truth doesn't account for something beyond the physical, that there's something metaphysical that this points to. So as a result, you start seeing people that you never thought as spiritual now are realizing they are spiritual. We were laughing backstage. My wife and I were watching on Netflix. There's a show called Comedians in Cars. Has anyone seen that? Some of you may be seeing it, and it's Jerry Seinfeld takes out other comedians in his car, and they talk about life. And so one of the episodes, he takes out Jim Carrey, and I grew up watching Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber, and I would have never thought in my life that Jim Carrey would be incredibly spiritual, trying to connect to the universe. I mean, he's Ace Ventura, right? He's Dumb and Dumber, and yet he's realizing in all of his achievement, in all of his accolades, in all of his money that he's made, and whatever, these Jerry Seinfeld and Jim Carrey they're realizing they are intensely spiritual beings. So this is what we have to understand as we talk about this. Now, here's kind of what's interesting. I want to give you just a few different people that are experts in the science community. Here's what they're saying about science and faith, okay? So there's an individual, his name's Quinton Smith. He's an ardent atheist. He's a philosopher against Christianity. He's actually started to resent the fact that in universities, Christians are taking over the philosophy departments. It's frustrating him. He's like, why are people taking a logical position to God, and the theists are representing the philosophy departments? But here's what he says. He says, the field of philosophy is being desecularized across universities in America. 1/4 to 1/3 of the philosophy departments now consist of theists, generally Christians. Okay, so what we're actually seeing is in the education community, in the university world, in the science world, there are becoming more and more people that are going, this is a logical position. And some of this he would attribute to one of the most famous philosophers, Alvin Plantinga, considered one of the greatest living philosophers in the world, is a Christian. And so people are looking at it going, okay, these arguments are actually, for the skeptic who believes that Christians are people just drinking the Kool-Aid, suppressing knowledge. Actually, no, the stats are showing that people who study, who are growing deeper in the science, that the facts are actually pointing towards God, not away from him. So what's interesting about that is another individual, his name is Francis Collins. You might have heard of him, but he did a ton of work on a project called the Human Genome Project. And maybe you've heard of this, but what him and his team did was they mapped out all of the gene sequences of our DNA. And in the process, he ended up writing a book called The Language of God, because what he found when he wrote this in 2006 was that the evidence was pointing not away from God. That the deeper that he dove into science, the more that he actually saw that there's something here that is not explainable by science. It pointed to something more. It's pointed to truth. Again, another cosmologist, Alan Sandage. So I'll give you some history to Alan Sandage. So how many of you have heard of the Hubble telescope? Okay, so Edwin Hubble, back in the 20s and 30s, he did a whole ton of work on astronomy and cosmology, which is the study of the origin of the universe. When Edwin Hubble died, his apprentice was named Alan Sandage, and Alan Sandage is considered one of the world's greatest cosmologists. He's measured the speed at which the universe is expanding in a formula called the Hubble constant. Anyways, he's world-renowned, and in all of his research, look at what he says. He says this: "It is my science that drove me to the conclusion that the world is much more complicated than can be explained by science." So why do I say that? I say that because science shouldn't kill your theological curiosity. It should actually spark it. That the deeper you dive into truth, the more that it actually points to the fact that there's something that cannot be explained by science. There's something beyond the physical. There's something that is metaphysical, that is worth exploring. I'll give you one more. David Bentley Hart, who is another doctor. He's a doctorate in philosophy. He's well respected. He says it this way. He says, "I do not regard true philosophical atheism as an intellectually valid or even cogent position." So what he's saying is that people, again, in the scientific community are saying, I don't even consider this a reasonable scientific way to approach looking at creation or sort of our origin, intellectually valid or even cogent position. In fact, I see it as a fundamentally irrational view of reality, which can be sustained only by a tragic absence of curiosity or a fervently resolute will to believe the absurd. The case for belief in God is inductively so much stronger than the case for unbelief that true philosophical atheism must be regarded as a superstition. So why do I say that? I think it comes down to this for me, is that for many of us, none of us are content with the answer to anything that we experience being nothing, okay? None of us are content with that. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was sick out of my mind, okay? It was bad. I was in and out of too much information, I know. In and out of our washroom all day long. Today I'm just barely hanging on, but I'm there. And for me, I'm literally thinking through, what did I do wrong? What did I eat? Was it that chicken that I did? Is it because I ate a whole thing of popcorn at the movies when I went to Avengers? I'm trying to think through all of these things that I did wrong. What happened? My family's not sick. They ate the same thing. Is it because of just been working too hard? So we all want to know the reason behind something, right? It's the same thing when we moved into our house. My front door, the door jamb, it's a little bit loose. So it was freaking me out. The first nights we were in my house, I thought somebody was trying to break into my house, right? The door is like, do. And I go out there and I want to figure out, what is this? It's not nothing. None of us are okay with nothing, right? Nothing is not an acceptable answer for us. So sure enough, I look at it, I kind of pulling on it. It's just loose, and I see it's windy outside. It's the wind, right? So we all want to know the reason behind something. So why is it in the world of science, would we ever be okay with the fact that behind everything is nothing? It's actually not that good science. So the point of all of this is that if your problem with God is that people of faith just put their head in the sand, they're anti-intellectual, it's actually not true. The people who are actually in this community are saying the facts are pointing to that there is something behind the something. There's something that science cannot explain. There's something that's metaphysical. Okay, so that's myth one. Are you still tracking with me? Okay, good. Okay, myth number two. Myth number two is that the church is against science. How many have heard this before? That the church is anti-science and, they suppressed it throughout history. In fact, what's interesting is I was reading, there's an individual, an evolutionary biologist. His name is Stephen Jay Gould. And he says this. He says that the 19th century has been the biggest fabrication of this myth ever. That it's actually simply just not true. Any historian worth their weight would say the church has never been against science. There's been anomalies, there's been the odd thing, but not nearly to what we've painted it as. People have cited guys like Bruno in the 1500s they say he was executed because of his science. And the truth is, he wasn't. If you really look into, Giordano, Bruno, his story is that he was executed because he questioned the Trinity. He questioned Catholic tenets of faith, transubstantiation, all these different ideas. And so we're going to talk about that next week. That doesn't make it okay. We're going to talk about hypocrites next week. So if you're interested, you can come and be a part of that next week as well. But point is this, is that historically the church hasn't been anti-science. I'll give you a great example. Copernicus, in the 1500s, he suggested that the Earth the Earth revolved around the sun, not the opposite. Which again, in the day, everyone was teaching that the sun revolved around the Earth, and so he suggested this heliocentric view that the Earth revolved around the sun. And you would think that the church was the ones who pushed back against it, but it wasn't. The church didn't push back against it. It was actually the scientific community, because they had an agenda. They've been teaching this for thousands of years, that the sun revolved around the earth. And so this pushed against their agenda. So it wasn't the church. I'll give you another one, and this blew my mind, okay? I don't know if you grew up in church, but I grew up thinking that, the Big Bang Theory was an anti-church kind of idea. That, church believed in creation, and people of science believed in the Big Bang Theory. Did you know, and this is just for your information, did you know the Big Bang Theory was actually suggested by a Christian? And actually the father of the Big Bang Theory is literally a priest. He was actually a father. His name is Georges Lemaitre. That's my best French accent, okay? And he suggested this. And you know who pushed back against this? Not the church. It was the scientific community. And you know why they pushed back against the Big Bang Theory? Because it reeked of religion. It reeked of the idea that there was a cause behind the cause, that there was a finite beginning, which meant you had to explain that there was an uncaused cause. It smelt a whole lot like a God was behind this. So the scientific community said, we're not interested in this. So what you need to know is some of these things that we think are true, that the church is anti-science, it just simply isn't true. It actually isn't true. It couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the household university names that you know are a 12th century Christian idea. Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Dartmouth, Brown, all of those universities are a Christian idea from the 12th century. I'll give you one last thought on this one. Oxford professor Alistair McGrath said it this way, that the idea that science and religion are in perpetual conflict is no longer even taken seriously by any major historian of science. one of the last remaining bastions of atheism which survives only at the popular level, namely the myth that an atheistic fact-based science is permanently at war with faith-based religion. So on the pop culture level, it still exists that science is against faith and that church is against science. But any historian that actually looks into this, if you really take it to the scientific community, they would say that's actually just simply not true, historically. Okay, so that's just a bit of a myth that we need to kind of take out of the way. It's just simply not true. Okay, myth number 3. And this is one I think that you might be able to grab a hold of even a little bit better, easier. It connects with me very, very easily, which is this myth that faith is blind. And maybe you've heard this narrative that people of faith they sort of live in this bubble of confirmation bias, and they just cherry pick the information that suits their belief, and they don't actually look at the facts. And to that, I would say, actually, it's a myth because of this reason, that I would actually argue that every single one of us is blind. Every one of us has a confirmation bias. And this is honestly the hardest thing for us. We all want to believe that we see the world with a blank slate, don't we? That we don't have a bias to how we see it, that we don't have a looking glass or lens that we see the world through. But every single one of us does. It's not just the faith community, it's the scientific community. It's every single one of us. We have a lens. And if we could just be self-aware enough just for a moment to see that on both sides of this conversation, we all see the world through a biased lens. And the reason we have confirmation bias, there's a lot of reasons, but I'll just give you some. This is just fun food for thought, okay? What's interesting is, I don't know if you remember for those of you that grew up in the 80s and you had the door-to-door people come to your door and sell you the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? How often did that information change? It didn't. It didn't change, right? And so what's interesting is what science is discovering too is that, the rate in which information changed started really from 0 to 1500 AD. It doubled every 1500 years. And then they saw that information was doubling every 250 years. And then every 150 years, all the way to the 20th century where information doubles every 2 to 3 years. Up until today, information doubles every 12 hours. So for all of us, we're trying to take all of this information and sort of sift through how can I understand the world and the universe, and how can I take all of this and look at it through a lens? It's our only way of making sense of the universe. This is why we do it. But here's what you need to know. Every one of us sees the world through a lens. And this is a problem because it doesn't allow us to sometimes see things for what they are. I'll give you a great example. Richard Lewontin, he says this. He says, we have a prior commitment to materialism. And let me just give a quick precursor to Richard. So Richard is actually, he prefers naturalism. He's a Harvard biologist. And what's interesting about him is his admission to the world is that I prefer to see things in a naturalism philosophical view. I choose to see the world this way. And so as a result, here's what he says. He says, I have a prior commitment to materialism. It's not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our priori adherence to material causes, and this is what I want you to grab onto, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So he's saying, essentially this, he's saying, I refuse to allow myself to conclude that there is a supernatural explanation for anything. And the challenge with that is that's actually bad science. He's not actually following the facts, he's following a philosophy. And the reverse can be said too, as again, for many of us. You say, I refuse to see anything other than my philosophy of a Christian faith and to not see the science for what it is. And so here's my conviction, is that as we explore truth, that if we're going to really follow this, you can't follow it with a conviction with a precursor to say, I'm going to look at it through a naturalistic lens and choose not to see the supernatural, because that's just bad science. It's not logical, it's not rational. So it's a bit of a myth for us to realize that this happens on both angles, that every single one of us sees things through a lens. I'll give you one last example. There's a story of a nurse who was taught her whole life, when you go into your job, you simply don't bring your faith into your job. You just do your job, you leave your faith at home, and you do what you do. And so one day this nurse was with several doctors, and they were around this patient, and they were deciding, are we going to pull the plug on the life support of this gentleman? And so they decide to eventually to pull the plug, and as a result, this individual passes away. And in those last few moments, the doctors look at one another and they say, I'm glad that we pulled the plug because he's no longer suffering. And they walked away. And in this moment, this nurse has this wait a second, you just made a faith statement. You told me to leave my faith at home, but you made a faith statement that there is an afterlife. You made an assumption. You made an assumption that he's not suffering. Maybe, how do you know he's not suffering more, right? Every single one of us comes at life with a faith assumption. We all have faith. So if we could just admit it, every single one of us has faith in something. We have faith that when I drop a ball, it's going to drop at 9.8 meters per second squared, right? I think something like that we learned in grade 11. I can't quite remember. We have faith that it's going to consistently do that. We have, every single one of us has faith. So the question is no longer what, faith or science, faith or non-faith. The question is, which faith is more rational? Which faith is more rational? Which faith, actually, when you follow all the facts, is more rational? Because to say that I don't have faith is simply not true. Every single one of us has faith. The question is, what is your faith in? And if you actually follow the truth, if you follow the facts, if you can just open your mind for just a moment to see that maybe I see the world through a lens and it's actually not allowing me to see the facts, maybe you'll see that there's something beyond what you see. So this is the question. Faith, myth number 4, and this is the one I'm going to end with. Myth number 4 is this, is that science disproves God. How many have heard this before? Science disproves God. Okay, so here's what's interesting in this myth is in the scientific community, there's a narrative that most people would say, people you meet that would say, I believe in evolution. They would say evolution has given all the answers to origin and morality and meaning, and yet there's a few tenets that you have to work through, okay? And here's a few of the problems if you believe in evolution that you have to deal with, okay? And here's the first problem and this is where Richard Dawkins gets a lot of flack, even from the scientific community. They say things like, stop saying these stupid things because you're making us look bad. The science community is saying this. And Richard Dawkins would say things like, I can prove evolution, ergo there is no God. Okay, that's sort of a Richard Dawkins saying, right? I can prove evolution, therefore there is no God. And yet the challenge with that is there is 1,000 proofs that you have to make between I can prove evolution and there is no God. There's hundreds and thousands of proofs that you have to make that jump. It's actually not a logical jump. So you have to work through that. That's one problem. The second problem is with evolution would be things like macroevolution versus microevolution. So here's what I mean by that. In the science community, what they're saying is that there should be more transitional forms. So macroevolution is that you should have, monkeys on their way to humans, and you should have more, half whales on their way to becoming a whale, and more half horses that are, transitioning to their new form. That in this process of evolution, there should be more fossil records of macro transitions, and there just simply isn't. In fact, in this community, Stephen Jay Gould, who's an evolutionary biologist, he says this. He says, the extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil records persists as the trade secret of paleontology. Now look at what he says. He says, the evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest is inference. So he's saying this is kind of like the best kept secret, that we've inferred backwards all of these things that simply aren't proven. There just simply isn't data to support it. Whereas on the microevolution level, there's thousands of papers every day showing how we mutate and evolve. And so those are different questions. I was actually watching on, I think it was on Planet Earth or something on Netflix. We were just talking backstage about this too. Apparently I watched a lot of Netflix. But they were showing these fish that because there was a lack of food in the water where they were in India, I forget exactly where it was, but they would actually now, they were able to evolve where they could actually jump out of the water and grab a bird and eat a bird. These fish had evolved and adjusted based on their circumstance. So So we see microevolution as there's actual evidence for it, whereas macro, the evidence just simply isn't there. Okay, here's the third problem you have to deal with, and then we're going to talk about some other stuff. The third problem with evolution is this, and this one's going to be the hardest for me, and you might have a bit of a brain like moment, but you can take a picture or think about it, and you could text the word notes, and maybe you could look at it. But here's where this sort of implodes on itself, okay? So it's a bit of a logic problem where evolution implodes on itself. And here's the logic. If macroevolution is true, then it means that it's possible that we only pass on that which is useful for survival. So one of the main tenets of evolution is that you only pass on things that are helpful for you to continue the gene pool, to survive, right? So as a result of that logic, that's possible. Then it's also possible that our cognitive faculties, our brain, is unreliable to pass on rational thinking. So it means that if evolution is true, you may not pass on rational thinking, which means you can't really trust that what you're thinking is true, which is the next part. It's possible that our rational thinking is not trustworthy, which then leads to this last thought that believing in macroevolution comes with the reason not to believe in itself. So some of you are like, wow, that's intense. But point being this is that it a little bit implodes on itself because in the very essence of evolution is saying that you may not be able to actually trust your own brain. And I think this is why Charles Darwin said it this way. And I'll leave you with this thought and then we'll transition here a little bit. He says, within me the horrid doubt arises whether convictions of a man's mind which has been developed from the mind of lower animals are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind? So this has become known as Darwin's doubt. He's even doubted himself that how can I even trust that my evolved brain is worthy of following the convictions of such a mind? So those are some of the things that we have to deal with. And so if what I'm saying is true, then there's a lot of scholars that are actually pushing back against some of these evolutionary narratives. That you have to look at and follow the facts. You have to follow the truth. And so here's my question for us today. All of this I say for this one thought, that what if the point of all of this science was actually to point us to something beyond the physical? What if it was actually to point us towards God? I mean, just for a moment, if you're a skeptic, to again doubt your doubts enough to think, what if for a moment it was possible that all of these things that we've measured the physical in was actually designed to point us to something beyond the physical? What if they were fingerprints, that we're chasing fingerprints, and as a result, on the other side of this, that this is the point of faith to take over where our science has left off? I think that's why Paul writes it this way in Romans. He says this, and I really like how he writes this. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, these are the things that are beyond the physical. These are his metaphysical qualities. His eternal power and his divine nature, they have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. That sounds a lot like science. Being understood from what has been made so that people are without excuse. It's this idea that what if the point of faith is to take over where science left off, and what if the whole point of creation was never for us to understand, it was never really about the when, but it was about the who and it was about the why. The other thing I think for a lot of us, if you grew up in the church, you got hung up on this one simple idea of creation, literal creation, young earth or 13 billion-year-old earth. And that became the crux for you. And if you couldn't line that up perfectly, it was like, no, everything falls apart. And what if it doesn't? What if the whole point of the Bible was never meant to be a scientific textbook? It wasn't meant to actually describe when. What if this God that was outside of space and time, for him a day was 1,000 years, and for him what falls apart? I'll tell you what, nothing. Nothing falls apart. So we have people in our church who believe in a 13 billion-year-old earth, and we have people who believe in a literal 6,000-year-old earth. And you know what? It actually doesn't matter because it wasn't about when. It was, I think, about who and why. It was to reveal to us that there is a God, that there is a God who's worth knowing. And if you know him, you could actually experience his love. And so I got thinking of, even this last weekend, I went to visit for my first time my niece. I'm an uncle for the first time. And we went there, and we saw my new niece, Eloise, and she's super cute. And we were talking about all these birth stories, and that was awkward. But anyways, after we got done talking about all that awkward stuff, I got thinking about, like, all the memories came back of when my boys were born. And I got thinking of how spiritual of an experience that was for me. It wasn't in that moment, it wasn't how can I pass on the right genes and survival of the fittest for my kids. It was like I experienced something beyond the natural. I experienced the love of a part of me that was beyond the physical. It was metaphysical. It was like I was experiencing the love of the Father. I was experiencing what God's love must be like for me. And I think the point of all of this is to really actually point us to go, what if there's a way of not selling us short on this thing of science versus faith, but what if science led us to faith, and it actually led us to exploring the questions that all of us want to know, the existential questions. Who am I? Don't we all want to know that? Who am I? Why am I on the planet? What's the purpose of me being here? Why do I struggle with the things that I struggle with? And what's the remedy for all of those things? Those are our deep existential questions that all of us are trying to understand. And for me, when I look at the facts, what I'm seeing is that beyond the things that are physical, they seem to be pointing towards something metaphysical. And so my question is that worth exploring? I mean, if we're going to use the logic of science, I would say, yeah, it is. Because we all want to know what's behind the something. Because none of us are okay with nothing being behind something, ever. So why would we be with God? And then look at what he continues on saying. He says, for although they knew God. And maybe for some of you, this is where you experience the same kind of thing. You know a lot of information. You know a lot of facts. There's a lot of things that you're skeptical of, and there's a lot of information that you've Googled and you've researched. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie. And I think for us today, if I was to take away anything, I would say this. What if we could be the kind of people that explored truth? No matter our background, no matter our interest in science, no matter our interest in philosophy, cosmology, maybe our interest in none of those things, right? Whatever our interests are, what if we would be the kinds of people that said, we're going to commit to exploring truth? Because I believe that as we do that is the path towards being free. If you want to be set free, you explore truth. And as I see it, I think there's something here that for some of us, we've exchanged truth for a lie, that there isn't something more. Or at least there isn't a possibility of something more. And we worshiped and we served the created things rather than the creator. And if there was a creator, could it not be possible that he's worth looking into? Could it not be possible that he's worth pursuing? Could it not be possible that there's something there that might actually be worth looking into, that could change things for you? That could answer some of your hardest questions about why am I here? Where am I on the planet? What am I trying to experience? Why do I experience the hard things that I do? Why can't I seem to get through these problems? What's the remedy to all of this? What's the answer to life's hardest questions? Wouldn't we want to know those things? Because I believe you can know them. I believe you can know them. And as you explore truth, I believe that it'll set you free. So here's what I want to challenge you with is if you're a skeptic, pursue truth. Recognize that you have a belief system. It's called skepticism. That is a belief system. Challenge it. Challenge your own system to doubt your doubts enough to see that maybe there's something more. If you're an agnostic, maybe you would say, maybe I don't think God is someone who we could even know, that you would doubt your doubts enough to go, maybe God could be known. If you're an atheist, you'd say, I don't think, I choose not to believe in God. Maybe for you, you would say, maybe there's some truth here worth exploring. I don't know that I want to follow him, but I want to pursue truth. And if you're a follower of Christ, that you would explore truth, and it would transform your mind, and it would actually renew your mind so that you would become someone who is rooted in strength and truth, not just on whim and feeling, but rooted on something that's worth building your life upon, a rock, a foundation. And as we do that, I believe that you can be free. Let's pray. God, I thank you for your revelation of truth today. And I thank you, God, that every single one of us is on a journey of exploring your truth. And so I want to pray, God, that we would be the kind of people that would commit ourselves to exploring truth, God, in every aspect, whether it's in our lives, our families, our relationships, God, whether it's in cosmology and the beginnings of the universe, it's in astronomy, it's as macro or micro as it is, that we would explore truth. And I believe, God, as we do that you're going to reveal yourself, because you've been revealing yourself all along through your invisible qualities, through your creation. Would everything that we see actually point us towards a God who loves us, who has a plan for us, who has a remedy for the things that don't go right in our life, the things that are wrong in our life, and a way out, a way to save us. God, I pray that we'd be the kind of people that would explore truth and it would set us free. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Amen. So I want to just encourage you, if you have questions, you can text us. Again, Table Talk to 905-937-5610. If you would like to pick up this book, you can pick it up at Central Connect. If you would like prayer, our prayer team's going to be here. We'd love to pray with you. If you'd like to ask questions, Alpha, you can join it next week, 10:30. But before you go, I bless you with this truth, that there is truth. And as you explore it, may it be something that sets you free. I bless you with that in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Have a great week.